So, good evening, everyone. My name is Krishi Pathak, and it's my great pleasure and honor that I welcome you all on behalf of Department of Training and Placement, RTU Kota. And this session is under the Satkaam Programme, where we are getting this golden opportunity to interact with esteemed industry veterans and to know more about the corporate world, how the real life works as we are moving forward in our career. And today we are privileged to have with us Mr. Sandeep Karmarkar, sir. He is UX Design Lead at Google India. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today, giving us your precious time. And I guess almost everyone has joined, and everyone is looking forward to hearing the insights and knowledge that sir will share with us. So without wasting any time, I would like to hand over it to Sandeep, sir. Sir, you can go on.
Awesome. Thank you, Kriti. And thanks, everyone. Really looking forward to interact with all of you over next 1 hour, 55 minutes now. Uh, Thanks for the warm introduction. Really keen to share whatever that I've learned over the number of years with all of you. Couple of ground rules in terms of the expectations. Since Kriti has made it possible for you to unmute and ask questions, I would absolutely request all of you just to be more vocal. The more the questions, the happier I would be, because I believe it's a topic that all of you can relate to, even if you are not in any design streams. But design is something that all of us use, consume, react, comment on day-to-day basis. It's because it's so much part of us. And you will also hear me many times say this, that good design is also based on common sense. So all of us can definitely contribute into the session today. The slide deck as such is very light. The idea is to have more conversation and dialogue as opposed to just me boring you with the content, which might not make a lot of sense. But before I proceed, I just want to make sure if everyone is able to hear me clearly and see me okay, and can also see the presentation slide that I'm on.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Everything is fine.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So before I begin, quick introduction on my end. Who am I as a person? As you can see with all these photographs, I'm a photographer. I have done my bachelor's in fine arts, and therefore I also paint. All the things that you see here at the bottom right, these are all my paintings. Uh, these days I do a lot of digital paintings because it's a lot easier, but I've done pastels and acrylics in the past. My favorite medium is pastel on paper, but I think now this iPad Pro and Pencil and Procreate and all these softwares have taken over the world. I'm a sports enthusiast. I'm into cycling, running. I've done all sorts of crazy things, bungee jumping, skydiving. So you name it, I most likely would have done it. And I think my passion is mentoring, uh, teaching whenever I have an opportunity. So that's why this session is very dear to me, and also learning. So all in all, I think I'm just a curious soul. Would like to really learn everything new that comes my way. And of course, from today's session as well, I'll get to know something new from all of you. So with that intro, let's get into the high level agenda. Uh, the quote actually sums this really well. People ignore design that ignores people. Uh, I think the idea is, if I were to ask you, give me maybe a sense of any very well designed product that some of you must be either using or are aware of. And I'm sure these are examples that are all around us. So you don't have to go elsewhere. You just can see what you have around you, and you should really know which of these products that you absolutely love. So anyone who would like to unmute and just share which one of the products that they really like and they feel that's really designed well? You can also type. Let me see if I can open chat. Okay, yeah, my chat is also open. So if you prefer typing, please type. If you prefer speaking, absolutely great. iPhone, yes. Anish says iPhone. Anything specific about iPhone that you like, Anish? Snapchat, yeah. The design, okay. If I may, what within the design that you like, Anish? And I will be able to take references of this in just explaining why we like certain things and why we do not like certain things. Haha, yes. The aluminum framing, Lamborghini. Wow, yes, absolutely. It's a premium brand. Bhairavi says, I like the way Samsung found a way to bend the phone screens, as in the Z folds. Yes, absolutely. I think that was innovative. The bendable screens, I think that sort of revolutionized the technology consumption of how different products are consuming this. Uh, so, absolutely great. So, effectively, if you really look at some of these answers, you would perhaps understand that all these products are solving a functional need. And what I mean by functional need is, um, again, going back to Anish's example, iPhone. The reason why we like iPhone, or at least iPhone when it was launched, was it was innovative because I think what Apple managed to do is managed to combine and innovate, not invent, innovate something that was not done before, which is combining a phone, combining a camera, and combining an MP3 player into one device. And that sort of completely revolutionized the way. And on top of it, everything was based on touch. You don't need a stylus. And that was so revolutionized that I think Nokia, who was major market leader up until 2007, they almost went bankrupt in multiple years to come, because they just couldn't catch up. So this was like a leapfrog innovation that I think Apple managed to introduce, and I think they've continued to innovate. Of course, there is Android, and you probably feel there are some folks who really like Android versus some who absolutely love Apple. But I think it goes back to this fundamental idea that design is about solving problems, and user experience design specifically, which most of the session is about enabling people to solve those problems faster. So design would allow a good design. For example, an iPhone, the reason why we like iPhone, or maybe Lamborghini. Now, Lamborghini you may like because it's really fancy, posh, luxury segment car. But if you actually drive it, you will probably love it even further. That's because it is allowing you to really enjoy the way you would drive a car versus an Indica or a Honda City, or maybe Mercedes or any of the other cars. So there is some aspirational value. Sorry, is there a question? Maybe not. Uh, so there is some aspirational value in some of these high-end brands, but I think the design in that particular context, based on the two answers, you can almost separate design into two parts. One is almost the way things look to you in terms of the look and feel, textures, feel like the aluminum frame, the round corners, and things like that. But there's also the functional value, and many times we talk about the aesthetics, but we forget the functionality. So the design that we will talk about today will certainly cover both the angles here. So at a very high level, I will talk about these two terms, UX and UI. And by the way, before we proceed further, at any point in time, if you have a question, just type it or just raise your hand so that I can make sure that I'm able to give you the clarity. Again, the idea of 1 hour session is just to introduce you to this topic. Of course, I will not be able to cover everything, but the idea is at least to generate the curiosity in all of you. So we'll quickly go through the content, and of course, I would love if there are more questions up until 4 o'clock. We can chat. So we'll look at some good examples in terms of design. we'll look at differences where there is a good design versus a bad design. And many of these examples are coming purely from an example standpoint, at least on the interface level, because the experience design is mostly about the UI. We won't get into the industrial or product design too much, but we may have examples coming from that as well, verbally. But visually, you will probably see more of, again, tools that are typically consumed. And if you have time, if you folks are interested, maybe there's a homework that you can look into. Now, you if you read anything about design, you would probably hear the term empathy. Uh, has anybody used the word empathy in any of your life on day-to-day basis? I have an example here, which is ambulance. Any guesses as to why the lettering on the front one windshield is written in this particular fashion, in the reverse fashion?
Sir, it is because so that when we see in mirrors, so it is right way.
And why is that? It's a good answer. It's a right answer. Who is going to see this in the
So that the driver which is driving in front, we can make him understand easily.
Absolutely right. Good answer. Uh, what is really happening in this particular example is, let's say you are ahead or you're just driving, and you hear, of course, if you have habit of looking into the rear view mirror, you would hear or see an ambulance. The only reason you can see this easily because it's written reversed, so that in the mirrored fashion you can actually see it in the right way. So that is basically designing for the drivers who are ahead of us, and they can give us way because the ambulance, there is an emergency. So this is really designing around empathy. Now there is another thing that ambulance has, which is a siren. Now let's assume that the vehicles, which all of us most of the times in the city, we roll up our windows and we listen to music and we keep going. At times we can see, or at times we can hear. We probably can't do both. So the siren is used also, again, empathy. People who cannot see, maybe bike folks who are on the bike, maybe there are cars way ahead of us, they can't see, but then they can at least hear. That's why the siren is supposed to be activated only when there is an emergency. If you see a patient who is not inside the ambulance and the siren is on, that's a punishable offense apparently. So again, the idea of empathy is, my favorite example is really yeah, as you rightly said, uh, it is the simplest example for driving or designing around empathy and for empathy. And this is all around us. Again, I am just trying to open this with giving you things that are all around us. Now, again, a definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. And as designer, when we or you come across any designer, when we design, what we really do is we are trying to empathize with someone who's going to use our product. Let's say the folks who designed iPhone at Apple, the idea was, how is it going to be for someone who has never used a product which is with touchscreen? How can they start using it without much of help? There probably was a less than A5 size folded uh, leaflet which had something around, this is how you use your iPhone for the first time. I think these days they've stopped giving that as well because it's intuitive. What do you mean by intuitive? Intuitive is something that you do not have to teach someone. They can just understand just looking at it, how some things are going to behave, because it is predominantly based on their expectation of how something is going to be done. So you can talk about, let's say, many other examples. For example, Spotify. Nobody would teach you or give you a session of how to operate Spotify. I mean, there are videos on YouTube. There are videos on YouTube for anything and everything. But the idea is you just get going. You sign up. Nobody tells you how to use Netflix. Nobody tells you how to use Amazon Video, because the idea is these designs or systems are created with a deep empathy for user base. And in this case, it could be kids, it could be adults, it could be elderly. So it's all around us. It's just that we probably don't know how much of effort design teams or companies take to really make sure something is really nicely designed. Now, here are some screen level comparisons. I'll probably ask you again, it might be very easy to really say which is good, which is bad. In the first example here, loading 50%, loading please wait. Which is a better one, left or right?
Left.
Okay, why?
Sir, because user can know his progress, so it will be more comfortable that way.
So the clarity of status is exactly known on the left side, which is loading 50%. And if you know that you were looking at the screen for about a minute, it's going to probably take another minute. Loading please wait, indefinite wait makes us feel even more longer. Any real life example of this that you have seen? All of us have seen this and use it on day-to-day basis. Anyone?
Sir, while editing some photos, it happened that my progress was almost completed, but I didn't know my progress, so I exited it, and that's why I have many times lost my entire hours of progress.
Yes, good example. Traffic lights, great example, Anish. Uh, it is, it's the best use of really defining how long some things are going to take in real life in layman's term. And typically, what do? It's a 50-second. We know that nothing is going to happen for 50 seconds. So what's the user behavior? We just open our phone and start checking notifications because there is a set understanding that it's 50 seconds and not 120 or unlimited. When you see unlimited, you start actually at the traffic lights. When there is no timer, you start missing something because you don't know when exactly it's going to turn green from red. So very good example. Okay, here quickly on the email side, left or right?
Right one is good.
And why so?
So we have clarity that what exactly is our issue.
Absolutely. Good. So again, as I said, design is common sense. Good design is common sense. If let's say, if I mean, you guys are still students, but if you interact with any government systems, you just don't know what's happening. There is no transparency. There is no understanding of status, and you just feel frustrated. So the example on the left just says error, and then you as a user must be wondering, okay, wait a minute, are you telling me that your system is not working, or are you telling me that what I entered is not right? How do I even know what I should be changing? Again, no empathy, and therefore high frustration. So on the right, yes, it's exactly telling password is incorrect, and it is also going a step level beyond that and saying, if you have forgotten the password, here is a link. So it's again understanding and empathizing with user situation and really saying what needs to be done. On the right, again, these two examples, left versus right. This is probably a subtle one, but let's talk about another design principle here. You would go with the left one or the right one?
I think the
So
right.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right is the right answer. And what is your reasoning for it?
Because like the song names are highlighted more than the artist's name, which is due to the fact that mostly we know the names of the songs and not the artists, so it will be easier for us to distinctly see that.
Sir, I
Absolutely
will
right.
also like to add understandability. For
Mhm.
example, here we have Mohabbaton 26 songs. So, sir, exactly a person might think that they are both same or like hear me now, Alok. So there it means like Alok should hear that.
Yes. And this goes back to another design principle. Again, because we are on this, I'll probably mention this. The design principle here is called the emphasis. Now, as designers, we decide what do we want to emphasize on. So on the right side, you probably want the name of the song as opposed to how many songs and maybe how long. Maybe this is 13.1 weeks. So the usage, the de-emphasization is done with the color and the size both. And on the left, you almost feel that everything is at the same level. So you, as you rightly said, hear me now, Alok Ziba is probably the name that you would read, and that's not true. So emphasize is another strategy. Any particular example that, I mean, we have all used emphasize that you can think of? Newspapers. Where is the emphasize model? Newspaper, page 1. The most important headline is in 72 font size. Everything else start going down because the emphasis tells you, or rather almost grabs your attention as to what is that you definitely should not miss. So the most important headline, page 1, on the top right or top left, it starts from, is the most bold or the bigger in terms of what you can see on the screen. So again, these are all techniques that we all use. We spoke about iPhone being, again, it's a very cliched example, but yes, absolutely. So I'll skip this slide. Here's another example, TripAdvisor. Now, if you go to any of these travel sites, what is that you typically look for? You look for where do you want to go? So look at the interface. It is allowing you to really understand. You enter what you are looking for, which is search. It gives you hotels. It gives you rentals. It tells you things to do. All of that you perhaps would come to a site for. Now, if all of this is here, you would actually feel, hey, wait a minute, this is very easy. And sorry, Dia, I'm just looking at your comment now. I missed it. But yes, what you have written is right. So yeah, coming back to TripAdvisor example, everything, if you feel, again, design is helping users to achieve your goal. If you come to TripAdvisor to really search for information about your hotel or vacation rentals or things to do if you're already in a new city, how best I should help you to really achieve this. Now, I'll give you an exact opposite example. And I'm sure as students, you have all gone through this system. It's our dear system from India, which is called IRCTC. Now, you will always wonder if IRCTC is there to make more money as opposed to give you options to buy tickets easily. Their advertisements almost reminds me of Times of India when print used to be awesome in terms of the medium. Times of India, I have seen Times of India as a newspaper having 70 odd pages. It's just because there are more advertisements than the actual news. So IRCTC is the digital example of that, where you actually start wondering, okay, now I'm here to book tickets. All I see is ads and nothing else. Of course, that's their revenue generation model. But at times you start wondering, it's not helping me achieve my goal faster. So therefore, you don't like those interfaces. Okay, quickly moving on. Coffee making is a very elaborate process. For someone like us who probably don't know, there are people who would exactly want their coffee in a particular fashion. And some of these machines, they're all integrated where you have coffee beans, you have hot water, you have milk, all of that put together. And with bunch of options, you actually get what you're looking for way easily. Now, again, the point on this particular slide is this is going back to the empathy. This is going back to understanding of when we do designs. Like, for example, if I were to do the coffee maker, I would actually go sit, observe people who makes coffee. They would actually do it in a certain fashion. I would probably create a prototype. I would ask them to use my coffee machine. I would very deeply sit and observe not just one person, but many, many individuals across age group, that not across ethnicities, and try and understand, is this really working well for them? So it is really based on data, and it is really based on usage as to what is really working well and what is not working well for people. I'll, in the interest of time, will skip some of these examples because I think we have spoken about the Spotify example already. Again, high level idea here. Why do we feel, again, this might be an older example because Spotify keeps updating their interfaces, but typically things like you go to a music player to listen to music, you may have your personalized music playlists. You would definitely want to search. So again, most of these nicely designed mobile applications, you find them easy because you either have your library, you can search, you go to homepage, it'll probably create mixes for you based on what you have listened because they have your data. And therefore you feel, oh, wow, this is really nice. I would like to go back and keep using it. And if you're even more excited, you may say, you know what, I'm just going to pay them money because I love it so much. They actually give what I'm looking for. So good design is also good business. And not necessarily you should just go the IRCTC way, where they, of course, make a lot of money through advertisement. But as a user who is you and all of the rest of the Indians who book our tickets, it should not be at the cost of their frustration. That's my personal philosophy as to why good design still can give you good business. Google, again, this is a browser landing page in Chrome, but what is really something that Google did? Simplicity. So good design is also about simplicity. Good design in this particular case is also about frequency. If you typically go to your inbox often, which all of us would do on, say, browser, it by default starts populating your frequently accessed pages. And therefore, again, what's our goal when we go to browser? We typically would like to achieve something. And if we typically go to these 5 places, these are created as shortcuts. So you really achieve what you're looking for. Moving on slightly, in order to make things work, you have to work with set of components. And again, in a physical world, if you all remember, doing drawings in your school and all that, we used to have stencils so that you don't have to write everything. You don't have to sort of draw triangles and all that. You have ready-made stencils. You just use stencils and keep going. Almost similarly, in the user experience world, you have UI kits that are available, and that's a user interface. UI is a user interface. And these kits would just allow you to use the components that you're looking for. So if you go to Android and if you look at material design, it gives you entire library of material design components. Because the idea is, if you are an Android developer who is creating something for the very first time, you don't have to all do from scratch. You just drag and drop, you work with plug and play methods. And therefore, what Google is making sure is your application will be looking, behaving, functioning almost similar, like at least 90% of the applications which are out there on the Play Store. And therefore, users' entry barrier or learning requirement would be much lower, because they probably know, they have seen other apps, so they have a sense of, again, intuition as to how some things are going to behave. That's the huge value of UI kits. And I think the other very practical value is, if things are available, if I can just drag and drop, I don't have to do all from scratch. Therefore, it's going to significantly save my time and my engineering team's time. Therefore, the release that I'm going to have in terms of my products are going to be much faster. So again, there is a business impact with respect to just having something that is consistent, that is known universally, and also something that's going to take much lesser time for users to go ahead with. We are in 30 minutes. I'll probably take a pause and see if there are any questions here. I'm also looking at the chat now. Printers, simple yet good design. What is UTS, by the way?
Sir, it is a train booking application of Indian Railways, in which we generally book train on same day.
Oh,
But it is actually nothing is clear in that what has to be done.
I think, yeah, I mean, I've been in the industry, design industry, for the last 23 years. And I think games and government websites, unfortunately, are the only two places where they by design looks like somebody's actually trying to confuse you. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, I think some of the newer age government apps are doing way, way better. But I think the whole system and the bureaucracy is so much that, despite of India having so many talented designers and very veteran creative individuals, somehow the government doesn't work with them. Digi Yatra, yeah. Do you like it? I registered. I'm actually traveling after this, and I had some issues with Digi Yatra, but I might be having a very critical lens to look at many of these things. But it's nice. It's just that it's probably having some scope in terms of either enhancing the functionality or enhancing the aesthetics, or both, I guess. Dream 11, yeah, I mean, it's very, very popular. I mean, the concurrent users on Dream 11 on day one of the IPL was crossing 10 lakhs, I guess. And they've been at it for several years. It's a Mumbai-based company. I mean, again, they've been doing phenomenal job. Cred, if you guys have seen, it's just unbelievable. CRED, I mean, in the design world, at least we say, if you have seen the CRED app, it is almost aspirational to have a completely fully functional app of that level. But they have managed to pull it. I mean, this exactly works as it is designed. And many times when designers design something, by the time it gets into the production, you have to compromise certain things. But I think CRED is one of those unique examples where you don't feel like somebody would have compromised anything, because the design, the wow factor is so high that you just feel, wow, this doesn't even look real. It looks like a prototype that somebody has built. So again, plenty of examples. But any other questions while we are at this pause, or shall I continue? Okay, I take that as good to go ahead. Okay, so let me proceed. So here are some of the key highlights.
Someone, excuse me, sir, someone has raised their hand.
Okay, sorry, I
I
didn't
think
see it.
you have.
Please go ahead, whoever has raised
Sir,
your
just
hand.
a simple question. So,
Yep.
like the example you have given of Indian Railways. So, sir, what it is generating, it is doing is focused on generating revenue. So,
Mhm.
sir, such thing can be considered a good design or bad design which generates revenue.
Very good question. Thanks for asking this. So in design industry, there is a concept of UCD, and I'll tell you what it is. UCD is user-centered design process. So fundamentally, the way to make sure ultimately you get your user happy is if you put your user in the center of everything that you do. And when you start really questioning every decision, keeping users in the center, you know exactly whether you are going to help user to achieve something or you're not going to help user achieve something. At times, by design, certain systems will add some friction or some delays where you don't have to just go do something immediately because it might just not work for you. For example, uh, the example that you're talking about, there's other sort of strategy which is called the BCD, which is business centered design. Now the IRCTC is good design, but it is keeping business in the center and not users. So from a user perspective or from a usability perspective, I would say IRCTC is not very good because it's not helping me. But if you probably are the CEO of IRCTC, or you probably head IRCTC, or you're Indian government, you probably would be absolutely happy with the way IRCTC is making business thanks to advertisements. So uh, the point that you are with your question that we are talking about is at times it is also about ethics in design and ethics in products that we really deal with. For example, how many times you go to a store and they'll ask you, sir, for billing, आप अपना phone number दीजिए, and you will be like, oh, no problem, take my number. You start receiving SMSs. In design, it's called a dark pattern. What I mean by dark pattern, you just have a one-way entry. There is no exit. You don't know if you want to stop receiving those messages. What do? You at times register for some websites by creating an account, and you just feel, oh, wait a minute, not good. Or after a year, 2 years, you feel, I don't want to have an account. There is just no option for you to go delete your data. It's just going to be there. It's again one more dark pattern. I'll tell you another dark pattern. When you register at a particular website, they'll ask you, do you want to sign up for any promotional emails, whatever that is? If that is by default checked, because your goal is to just go and register an account, without you realizing, you will start receiving all the promotional emails because the default was set that you should receive those messages. So again, it's a business taking priority over the users. So it's a slightly longer answer, but if you really ask me if I wear a designer's hat, UCD hat, IRCTC is not a great example at all. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks. These are good questions, by the way, and thanks for asking them. Okay, quickly, let's move on. I'll talk about difference. Again, these are the terms I'm sure you would have heard before: user experience and user interface. Many times they just people use them interchangeably, and that's not true actually, because user experience is almost as a discipline talks about the high-level experience. But the interface is part of that. So UX is a superset, and UI is a subset of it. For example, when we say iPhone, we are talking good experience about the entire experience of an iPhone, right from unboxing to switching it on, plugging this in, remotely charging. It's all experience. There may not be UI involved in some of these experiences, but yes, there is also UI involved, which is the screen, the buttons, the way they behave. So when we talk about UI, there are disciplines. Again, these are different disciplines within the design industry. If you like, I started my journey as a visual designer, which is here. And then the UI is typically about look and feel, colors, layout, size of the buttons, typography, how is user really behaving, and all of that. But if you really go on the left side, which is more of analytical side, it's about interaction design. Interaction is how am I as a human interacting with the system. It's about testing, prototyping, what we call wireframing. So to give you an analogy here, if you have been through a journey of buying a house, you typically used to have an architect who would give you a solution blueprint, like a large map of, oh, this is how the building, this is how the structure is going to be. That is like, oops, sorry, that's like a wireframe. That it's going to be like a 5-story building, kitchen yahan pe hoga, bathrooms yahan pe honge. And if you are like a normal user like me, you would be like, I don't even understand what you're saying. Therefore, these days, you have a 3D walkthrough of the house, or at least some photographs, renderings, AutoCAD renderings, because this is very hard for people to visualize. Therefore, you need to take help of the visual tools that are on the right to really make sense before you buy, commitment of 1 crore, looking at a blueprint, which is just lines and, shapes, very hard. Uh, I wonder how our parents used to do these kind of investments earlier. But now, again, industry is evolved. So that's like almost visual versus non-visual. And then UX is also about the way the information is structured. It's called the information architecture. It's about understanding user use cases and scenarios, under what circumstances somebody is going to be using our product. It is also about deep user research. And with that, we will probably, I kind of covered some of these things, but I think when we spoke about good UX design, I think we were definitely talking about how is the product or the system responding to user behavior, uh, how we can remove friction. Now, friction in this particular context, just to make sure everybody is with me, friction is about additional frustration or every step that is going to take you away from your goal. So a friction in the case of, let's say, again, IRCTC is the noise that you see on the screen by advertisements. Because you have to really focus hard and figure out where do you enter your login name and password. Uh, Real example, after almost 7 years or so, I was trying to book a ticket last year on IRCTC, and I didn't realize the reCAPTCHA or CAPTCHA, whatever that they have on IRCTC. Uh, to me, I felt that was an advertisement, and I kept on submitting, and it was just throwing an error saying enter CAPTCHA, and I was trying to see where was the CAPTCHA because I felt it was an advertisement. It looked like every other advertisement that was on IRCTC site. So just really hard at times, and that is all friction. It's about eliminating confusion. Like this particular example, there was so much of confusion that I just didn't know. You go back to error. If I just say it's an error, well, it's all confusion. How do you eliminate? So again, if you eliminate confusion, you'll probably get into good design. But if you keep the confusion, the good design becomes bad design here. We often don't talk about accessibility, but in this fashion, accessibility is really about if you have anybody in your family or your friend circle who is disabled or having limited motor skills, like our elderly parents or grandparents for that matter, you will really know what accessibility can do to these individuals. I grew up with a friend in my college who used to be uh, I guess, deaf. Because he was deaf, he couldn't speak. And I think I just, all of us as in our group used to have tremendous amount of empathy because of we used to see him just use bike, use every other system, he couldn't talk, he couldn't hear. But nowadays he's on phone and he manages to do everything. Now I've also seen people who are completely blind using applications because of screen readers. So accessibility is a huge deal. uh, and it's very important that as designers we all consider accessibility when we are designing this. And again, uh, slightly coming out of this and sort of talking about meta, if you must be wondering why is that we are talking about even user experience, I mean, you are from completely different streams. I think the idea is, every company that who does great design, like including Apple, now not necessarily just the designers are actually making that happen. Unless you understand, you will not be able to appreciate and then help the designs to be implemented. You might be working as an engineer, you might be working as a product manager, you might be working as an engineering manager, you might be working in support. If you really understand how and what good design is all about, you can play your part in making sure ultimately the company or the product that you're part of ends up delivering good design. You need not always be a designer. So the idea of an hour session is to just educate all of you towards becoming one aware individual who would at least understand and therefore appreciates what good design is. Because eventually you would work with people who are specialized, called designers, interaction designers, UX designers, industrial designers, or whatever. And then therefore you will find it a lot easier because you've gone through some of the basics. So that's sort of the overall idea. If that wasn't clear, I just thought I'll take a minute just to explain what that is. Okay, how are we doing on time? We have 15 more minutes. Okay, so let's probably get into some more specifics in terms of the tools and what we really do. Um, as I said, UX UI, good UI, like we talked about CRED. CRED is also great UX, but is also good UI. It's a very sleek UI. All of those Web 3.0 tools, I think that you may or may not have seen, they are absolutely having fancy UIs. I mean, the aesthetics are completely out of the world. It almost like alien to, if you compare that with say IRCTC. They are fresh, they're clean. There's absolutely no confusion in some of these interfaces. They're responsive. What I mean by responsive is most of these days, the applications or even websites for that matter are mobile first. We first look at mobile design and people using our product or service on mobile, and then look at our screens, because thanks to the advancements and cheaper mobile phones, people end up using more mobile. And like in Google, we had a team called Next Billion Users, where you actually have people moving not from computers to laptops to mobiles, but people who directly moving onto mobiles without having any of the other transitions. So they probably don't know what is it to have an email when you log in, because they probably never had one. They never created one on laptops for that matter. All they had was a mobile. Somebody said, oh, it's a new smartphone. They just went and bought one, and they're trying to figure this out, all this as a first time user. So again, some of these are contextual based on whom you're designing this for, but typically that's why the responsiveness has gone up. So this particular slide actually talks about how we do what we do as designers. And it's a busy slide. I'll try to sort of explain. The orange boxes are talking about the process, like understanding the problem, how do we gather the requirements, get into the ideation and things like that. And the yellow balloons, or rather white balloons, which has yellow outlines, are talking about some of the artifacts that we end up creating while we are in this particular process. So at a very high level, even if you sort of do not go through each one of them, what you definitely should understand is it is about first understanding and gathering what the real problem is, then coming up with an idea, which is about how you feel that this could be solved for a particular set of users, not assuming that this is really going to work. So therefore going into testing, then figuring out if the test has really worked well and you feel that, yeah, I mean, I could see that people were able to use it. then getting into, okay, now I think the design is kind of ready, then handing it over to engineers, UI developers, giving them details about, how exactly this needs to be done, getting this implemented, but also before it is released, also having a check, which is audit, to figure out if this is actually followed the design that the designers had given. And therefore also at the end figuring out, is this really helping user? At the usability testing, the hypothesis is that you probably test with say about 10 users. These are either mock users or real users that would use your product or solution. But after something is released, like Dream 11, there are millions and billions of users who are actually using it, and they would leave feedback on say Apple Play Store or Amazon Play. You would then go and read what they talk about, and therefore you have a very active feedback. You go and correct what is not working well for you. So that's a high level process. Unless you want to be a designer, you probably do not need to remember anything beyond this. All these are things that we all use. These are all artifacts that we create as designers. If you have any interest, maybe you should go read more about it. But if you just want to understand the high level process, and I kind of told you what the process is, there are absolutely many tools, uh, like in every part of software development. uh, we also have plenty of tools, and here is probably a list of all the tools that are out there. uh, you probably would have heard more about Figma, even if you're not a designer, because it's very popular. You would have also heard Sketch, which is this. And Sketch almost is sort of outdated now in a way, because Figma has literally taken over the world. And if you are following the tech news, Figma was, well, Adobe announced that they were going to buy Figma for upwards of like 12 billion, if I remember the number right. So it's huge. I mean, this is like as huge as it can get. And of course, these are the other things which only designers will end up using when they are going through the learning or defining the requirement journey. You might use a Miro board, even if you're a software engineer, because I mean, some of the usage is probably common across design or software engineering in this case. The implementation, again, some of these are very design specific tools. The look back, maze.design are again tools through which you will allow yourself to actually go test what your users are doing. Like loop back would actually anonymously record users session. uh, Ashish, Anish is asking, can Canva also be considered a designing tool? Yes, Canva is a design tool, but I think the segment that they deal with is slightly different. Yeah, yes, Figma is just awesome. Great tool. I mean, absolutely everybody talks about Figma these days because I think it's just a very powerful tool. Going back to Anish's question, Anish, Canva is actually serving non-design professionals, people who would like to do something, but they don't want to learn the Adobe tool set equivalent. So it is serving a very different market. But yes, absolutely, it is definitely a design tool, no doubt about it. The reason why probably Canva is not showing up because these are, as I said, tools used typically by designers. And Canva or some of the other non-designer tools are probably not listed here. But good question. Okay, quick summary in terms of the UI UX design process. It's typically a 6-phase process, and you can type UCD process on Google. You will find plenty of, sort of diagrams which talks about this. Effectively, it's actually a non-linear process. I mean, you can say start with design, or you probably are already in the design phase. And when you start, you probably say, yeah, I think something is wrong. You might then go back to research, or you already, you have a product which are already out there, and therefore you would like to go and first evaluate. So you might actually start with evaluation, which is kind of connected to research. But effectively, it's about, as I said, we started with empathy. It's about first doing some research, having the empathy, then design, then production, and do all of this. I'll give you one more example of an empathy here, real quick. I'm sure. What about Illustrator? Sorry, I'm just going back to chat. Illustrator is also a design tool, but it is not used by designers or user experience designers, because the focus that Illustrator has is to allow people create vector graphics, which is not for web, not for applications, but is for graphic designers. So Illustrator is extremely popular, but that's why it's not showing up in that, because it's not used by UX designers to create applications. Therefore, now you know why Adobe showed so much of interest by investing about $12 billion into like Figma, because entire design community is on Figma in terms of UX design community. Dia is saying graphic design versus UI UX design. Most people used to mix both. Yes, actually true. It's also awareness issue at times, because when people generally ask what do I do, and say I'm in UX. Oh, you do UI? I'm like, no, I'm in UX. So people interchangeably use terms. People who probably are familiar with graphic, they say, oh, that's graphic design. And I would say, well, yeah, okay. I mean, no point in getting into a lot of details if you don't know. But yes, these terms are used very interchangeably by people who probably don't know, but they're all connected. If they're not the same, at least they're all connected. The example that I was going to give you on empathy was about the water dispensers that you would have seen, and I think across India or even outside India, I have seen them. Somehow, whoever has designed those water dispensers have assumed that the average height of our user is like 4 feet, and every water dispenser would probably have those hidden taps that you just can't see from your height, and you end up, especially hot water, you end up burning your finger, at least first time. I'm sure everybody would have gone through this, where you just say, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know exactly where the nozzle was. You end up holding cups in wrong places. Same with coffee machines. So I just feel like the designers probably wouldn't have seen people using this device. Otherwise, possibly they cannot even design them in this particular fashion. It's just absurd. But yeah, without again getting into all these details here, all of these are different parts of the processes, like the information architecture, user flows. Only if you're a designer, you will end up designing all of these. These are very important from our standpoint as design and designers or design practitioners. But if you are part of sort of a development team or an engineering team, you will probably be participating while we generate some of these artifacts, or you might be receiving some of these artifacts. But they play a huge role in just creating and making sure we are ultimately doing something that is going to work for our user. And I don't know if we need to get into homework, but since we have only 5 minutes, we would rather wait and see if there are any questions. I would rather open the forum and see if there are any questions, comments, any follow-ups that you would like to have. Yes, go ahead, whoever has raised a hand.
Hi, sir. Good evening. So, I would like to ask the best way to be a self-taught UX designer. Like, what are the paths? What are the guidelines for become a self-taught UX designer, basically?
Okay, good question. I think for self-taught designers, there are just way too many resources on the internet. Interaction Design Foundation is probably one of the institutes. Google has a course for user experience professionals. Usability.org is another site where they offer courses. Udemy, Coursera, LinkedIn Learning. You have just too many resources now. But I think irrespective of what you end up choosing, my high level guidance would be just to be curious and observant about just your surroundings. You will probably see plenty of things that are broken around you. If you start seeing them in that particular way, you will start having enough curiosity as to why all of these things are broken and can I do something about it. Then you will probably figure out that you can do something about it, but you may not know exactly which method is going to work for you. Then the self-taught training material might come in handy. You can actually take up that as a small project and try and redesign something. Then you will really understand, is this really working for you? Is this something that you can even do as your profession? So I would say do some experiments in that particular fashion if you have thoughts to get into that as an industry. And there are amazing self-taught designers that I've seen in the industry. So design is one of those industries like acting, where they just don't ask you a certificate which proves that you're a designer. Like in acting, just because you're somebody's son, father, daughter, wife, not necessarily you're going to get acting gigs, right? So it's a show and tell industry. So you can do a lot in that way. Yes, Aryan?
Thank yeah.
Sir, like we are seeing these days that AI is replacing too many of jobs. So, sir, can a UI UX designer be replaced by artificial intelligence?
Good question. There's just been a debate going on in our community, designers community. Lots of senior designers are really involved in this. If you really ask me, um, I don't think so. Uh, but there are things that we do that will be replaced. So, for example, it's the calculator movement, which is earlier, probably when the calculators were not around, everything was done manually. And when the calculators were introduced, we started using that as a tool. Now, what UI that we do now, the kind of designs that we do now, we might have an AI system which will just generate. And there are already tools out there where you just say, create a login screen for animal lover app, which has a dog photo. It will just give you a Figma file. It just does all of that for you. But I think what I hope humans will not, or the bots or the AI machines will not be able to replace us with is the judgment. I think humans are best for creating judgment. Although you would have a system which is giving you what you're asking for, it is really important as to what you're asking for, point one, and what you're asking for is absolutely going to work for someone or not. That I don't think the AI systems can really do. And if everything becomes automated, these days there is a cult about everything that is handmade. Why is it important? Because everything is commoditized using machine made products. So now suddenly there is a need for having more handmade stuff, and the value for handmade has gone up. So we actually believe that while there are so many AI tools, if everything is driven by a code or a system, then you probably would have handcrafted design, which will have tremendous value in the years to come. But there are just too many examples where the goalpost is changing literally every single day. I mean, this last 7, 8 months itself, we've seen like 50 odd tools coming out and doing things that would not replace our jobs, but would replace some parts, or at times, depending on what your job is, many parts of your job. So you would still need to do things, but just because you have a bot who is just going to, mop or clean your entire house, you probably will end up doing something else, and that something else is going to be equally challenging. So we probably won't have calculation jobs after calculator is here, but you will still have a job. So I'm not worried about we not having a job. Sorry, that's a long answer, but we've actually taken one extra minute. I think Nayan is already here. Are there any other questions? You can just drop me. I have opened the slide. That's my email ID. I'd be happy if there are additional questions. Just send me an email, add me on LinkedIn. I would be happy to give clarity and answer any of your questions.
Cool. Thanks, Sandeep.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. This was a very interactive session. So thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity. I absolutely enjoyed last 1 hour. Over to you, Nayan.
Great. Thanks, Sandeep. Catch up later, man, with you. It's been a while.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir. And good evening, Nayan, sir.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I'll drop off now.
Yeah.
Bye, Nayan.
Bye. All right, folks. How's everybody doing on a Saturday afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Awake?
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. And my name is Shri Pathak, and I am welcoming you on behalf of Department of Training and Placement, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you, of course. So what are the plans for Saturday evening at RTU? Is there a special party tonight? Anything
No, sir,
planned?
no such party.
Nothing? Is it
No,
just
sir. We are
how?
having such an interactive session. That's enough for us.
Oh, I see. So how hot is it in Kota right now?
It is really hot.
What does really hot mean? Like, there are,
I
there are,
mean,
It will get worse, sir.
I mean, it's really, yeah.
like, what is it today? 40 degrees? It's 40. What is the worst it is going to get to?
48.
Okay. When does it
At
get to
40,
48?
it feels like 50.
By May?
Um,
May is
Sir,
when it gets to
yeah,
50.
in May and June.
mid-June and towards the end of May.
All right. There's somebody saying 49 as well. So, all right. Well, all I can say is good luck, guys. I was in Pune at a university day before yesterday, and Pune touched like 39, and it was the first day in my life I experienced 39. So I can't even imagine 49, to be very honest. So I'm just trying to figure out when not to come to Kota. Anyways, thanks for joining, guys. Hopefully Sandeep's session was good. Ours should be fairly simple, straightforward, fairly light for a Saturday evening. And hopefully you guys are not shy of me, given we did spend some time together when I was there uh, back whenever it was, actually, I guess. Just let me know if you are able to see my screen. Yeah,
Yes, sir, it is good.
you can see it. Okay, let me find something. Again, as I said, it's going to be a fairly light topic, so should be fairly simple. So, guys, we're going to talk about professionalism. Yeah. And the reason we're going to talk about professionalism is because you guys are going to make a sudden switch, right? Right now, you are all students in a college, which I assume is very similar to what it was when you were in schools. And so there wasn't much of a difference in terms of, you know, your lifestyle, your expectations from anybody. Right, the college gives you a timetable, you just follow that, you attend classes, you're supposed to turn in assignments, you do exams, and then you have like whatever 6 weeks, 8 weeks of vacations and so on. And then once you're done, suddenly you're going to be a working professional. Yeah. So let's first define, where do you hear the term professional a lot? Where do you hear people being referred to as professionals versus amateurs? In which field?
Like in acting career, when we see those stunts, and there's always a warning that the stunts are being performed by professionals.
Sure. Okay, you got that. I think Anish responded sports. So yeah, you're right. I mean, generally, you do, especially in when you say professionals versus amateurs, I think a lot of you probably will relate to sports. Right. A lot of you probably play cricket, and so does Virat Kohli. What is the difference between him playing cricket versus you guys playing cricket?
He's a professional, sir.
Okay. And what does that mean, Madhur?
He has experience, played for a long time.
Okay. What else? What's the most important difference that you wish wasn't a difference between him and you?
He's good at it, very good at it.
Okay. One more thing, something else.
Uh,
He gets paid for it.
Maybe
he gets paid for it. Yeah,
gully
he
cricket.
gets paid for it.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference, unfortunately, is that he gets paid for being a professional. And as an amateur, you do it because you like it. because you want to spend some time with your friends, because it's a hobby, right? So that's the biggest difference when it comes to like amateurs and professionals in these other areas, right? Like theater, acting, sporting, and so on, right? So similarly, when we move from a student to a professional, what's the big difference? What's the big difference between a student and a professional?
Sir, we are expected to be knowledgeable and somewhat skillful about what we are doing. But as a student, we are there to learn and to make mistakes.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think that's a pretty good. Anybody else have anything more to add? Especially around what we talked about was the biggest difference between professionals and amateurs, something along similar lines.
I guess experience.
Experience is there, but I was trying to take us back to, we talked of like the biggest difference in sports.
We'll get paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And right now, what are you doing? Right now, you
We
are
are
paying.
paying.
Yeah. So obviously, there
Yes,
is a
ma'am.
pretty big difference, right? So right now, you are paying to be in college, and you are going to get paid for being a professional, right? So remember that. That's a pretty significant difference. I am assuming you guys would all agree, right? So if we look at this, right? So when you join a company, you're going to take up a particular role, right? The role will have like a description, a job description, which is fairly well defined, right? It'll specify that you are in whatever XYZ role and you are expected to do ABC. But what is generally defined as the characteristics of a professional is never mentioned in the job description, right? You are just somehow suddenly expected that you have lived all your life as a student, and you become a professional, you get paid for it, you are told what your job description is, but these finer aspects of what a professional means are never really defined, right? And so that's what we are going to kind of touch upon today. Make sense? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So these are, I mean, you
Yes,
know,
sir.
we won't go into what we typically do in college, which is, textbook definition. I've just put that up over here. If you do a Google, I guess, or if you go to ChatGPT and ask, what does being a professional mean, it'll give you a definition of sorts. Different people have different inferences on it. Some think of it as, your appearance, some think of it as your demeanor, communicator, etiquette, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but let's not spend time on kind of the textbook level definition, because that's more theoretical. So let's go into a little bit more practical. Yeah. So one of the similarities, interestingly, is that in a college life, you do live by a calendar, right? There is something like a timetable, right? And you kind of are supposed to live and die by it, which is, you just follow whatever it is. Interestingly, so is the expectation in a working world as well. However, the interesting thing is, while you do live by the calendar, there are certain rules that are followed and expected. Yeah. So what I mean by that is, you will get calendar invites once you are working, someplace, and you are expected to respond to it. Yeah. And one of the mistakes a lot of people actually do and never realize is the fact that, once you have a calendar invite, what do you do with it? Yeah. So be sure once you are a working professional and you have a calendar invite, you accept the invite so that the person who sent it knows that you're going to attend the meeting. If you are not going to join it, please make sure that you reject the invite. And generally, as a professional, the expectation is when you reject an invite, you will specify the reason for being unable to attend that meeting. Yeah. And if you, let's say you've accepted a meeting and then something changes, your plans change, and for whatever reason you can't, as a professional, it is expected that you will let the person who has sent the invite know that I'm sorry, I was supposed to join the meeting, but unfortunately, due to whatever reasons, I will be unable to attend and kind of catch up. So those are kind of general rules of thumb of being a working professional and living by the calendar. Yeah, makes sense. The other thing to remember, and this is especially a bigger problem in Eastern economies, right? And we are honestly kind of probably experiencing it over here, right? So if you attend a meeting, right, which will be fairly common, you probably might have, I don't know, 3 meetings, 4 meetings, or video calls. As a professional, it is expected that if it is a video call, you will turn your cameras on, right? It is fairly frustrating, to be honest, when you get on to video calls and everybody has their cameras off, right? And it's a very common thing. Whenever I do calls with my counterparts in the western side of the world, you don't have to mention or remind them that it's a video call. It's quite natural. Everybody has their videos on, and if they don't, they will ask to be excused and explain why they don't have their videos on. While when you work with Eastern cultures, there is a very high tendency of people to have their video cameras shut off. Yeah. So remember that once you are a working professional, and you are more than welcome to turn your video cameras on right now itself if you want to get into a practice or habit of early incorporation into the professional world. Yeah. So feel free to turn your cameras on. The other thing that I do find a lot of people do make a mistake, which is very difficult in the professional world, is there are certain terms that are very country specific, right? So, you talk to anybody anywhere in the world and you say, 5 lakh, right? They will just be completely stumped in terms of what lakh is, right? It's a very India specific term. The same goes for crores. So be mindful of the audience, because as you start your professional career, you will have the opportunity to interact a lot of times with people from different cultures and different countries. And so try and avoid terminology which is very country specific. Yeah. And the other thing that I will add is, as a working professional, one thing that is always expected is if you go through and make a mistake, right? I think somebody commented that as a student, you are kind of learning on the job and you are experimenting and you can do mistakes. But I think as a professional, the one thing that is expected is at least it's okay to make mistakes, but it is definitely expected that you will raise your hands and say that I'm sorry, but I made a mistake over here. And, what was the reason that you might have made a mistake and so on. But most importantly, remember that it is okay and expected that you will own up to your mistakes. Yeah. So I'm going to pause over there and see what you guys think, or any comments or anything for us to discuss before we move on. Anything, guys? We are fairly clear.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. By the way, is there a disturbance? Because I did turn the fan on and it is quite noisy. I'm not sure whether you guys can hear me, but hopefully if it is, you
No,
let me know.
sir. It's fine.
Okay.
It's great. It's fine.
All right. Well, then let's continue. The next topic that I'm going to talk about, part of the reason is obviously, maybe my impressions are colored. But as I said, a lot of you will probably interact with people from other cultures, right? So one of the things that happens in companies where people from different country work together, especially large companies, have something called as cultural sensitivity training, right? Where you are made aware of things about other cultures that you will be working with. Yeah. So one thing that I wanted to walk through is let's discuss, what do you think people from other countries are told about when they will be working with Indians? Yeah. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to see, what do you think people from other countries are told about working with Indians? Navneesh says there is a higher chance of a language barrier. Can you elaborate a bit more, Navneesh? Do you mean that they will have a challenge because we have people who speak various different languages? Or I'm not sure I gathered it, but I welcome others on, what do you think people in other countries are told about working with Indians? What are they trained on?
Sir, don't laugh on their accent.
Don't laugh on the accent. Okay. That's a fairly good one. Yeah. All of us have various different accents, and be aware that people from North India might have a different accent than people from South India. So don't laugh about it. All right. Good enough. What else?
Sir, in contrast to what other people might be doing, I actually think that foreign companies and people would actually be more accustomed to working with Indians, because since we speak so many languages, we can communicate directly, and since Indians speak so many languages, it is more easier for them to communicate as compared to other countries which speak only single languages.
Yeah. That's a fair point, I think. But you will be surprised that, what you have to remember is, yeah, people in tech, and even in tech, I think it's more only Wall Street and California, and maybe like Boston, maybe Austin, Dallas, like those areas. If people have worked in tech, they will be familiar working with Indians. But there are a lot of other companies, I don't know, like Caterpillar, right? Or John Deere, which is like Midwest Indiana, where there are people who've never worked with an Indian in their entire life, right? And so I'm just curious whether we understand what are they sensitized about us as a culture. Anything else to add?
I don't know if they teach, but I think they should teach that they should not be stereotypical. Like to the Northeast, they think that they are not Indians and all.
Okay. So not to stereotype. And obviously for them, stereotype just means any brown skin is, you know, quote unquote Indian with a particular accent and so on. Okay, anything else?
And good in
All right, so I'm going to move on in the interest of time. And I'm going to, by the way, to begin with, I'm going to only talk about areas of improvement, right? So I'm not going to talk about quote unquote the good things that they talk about us as a culture, because you know we need to focus on areas of improvement for us. Yeah. So here's the first one that is fairly common. Yeah. What they are taught is when and if an Indian says yes, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a yes. Okay. And what essentially they are alluding to is the fact that as a culture, we find it hard to say no, right? And that's not a good thing, honestly. But again, being a professional, if we don't think something can be done, we have to say, I'm sorry, it cannot be done. But because we come from the Indian culture, and if let's say your boss asks you, can you get it done by Friday, right? We will always hesitate and say yes, even though internally we know that that's not going to be possible. Yeah. And so they are actually told about kind of the Indian head nod, right? You understand what I'm saying? Which, and they joke about it, saying, you know, the reason Indians
yes,
move like this is because, you know, they want to say no, but they also, but they won't, but they are saying yes. And so that's the reason the Indian head nod comes about. So that's a joke. But remember one thing, right? As soon as you are a professional, it doesn't matter, right, who you are talking to or who you are interacting with. If you know for a fact that something cannot be done, let's say by Friday, please raise your hand. Even if it is your boss, it is better to say, no, I'm sorry, I do not think this can be done by Friday because of A, B, and C. And hence, I believe I can get this done only by next Wednesday. Yeah. So do not hesitate in saying no, because after all, there is an impression out over there that Indians find it very difficult to say no, and we have to change that, right? Again, part of it is cultural because we feel like, how can I tell my boss no, right? But we have to get that out of our mindset and be truthful and honest and just let the person know appropriately. Yeah. The second thing that is often talked about is the concept, and let me ask somebody, I'm sure one of you will be able to explain to me, when they say, you know, what does IST stand for?
Indian standard.
And what do you mean by that, right? We make a joke of it. What do you think?
The timeline that we follow.
Yeah, that we are not very particular like a lot of other countries about time, right? We take the time aspect fairly lightly, right? So when we say 4 p.m., right, it could mean anytime after 4 p.m., right? And especially we experience it on our day-to-day lives, right? You call a plumber and sir abhi aata hai, aa hi raha hu sir, 15 minute, and you know 1 ghanta ho jata hai, and then he's like bas sir 5 minute, right? So that is another aspect that the internationals are kind of told about. Now what I would like is that I hope that, you know, that to me is a mistake that either my generation or the generation before me has done, which, let's be honest, right? It's not something that we should be proud of, right? And I do hope that each and every one of you over here, when you start your professional journey, will make every effort to change that reputation that we as a culture have earned, right? Let's try and make sure that even in your, and this honestly is, if you can follow it in your, I mean, you know, there's no that, oh, you can follow it in your professional life, but you will not follow it in your personal life. Essentially, if you imbibe this, that if I have given somebody a time, I will be there at that time, right? So you can actually practice this in your personal life on a day-to-day basis. And I do sincerely hope that this generation will change this impression that we desperately need to change. Yeah, so that's IST. And the other thing I think related to, I don't know who mentioned it, but with regards to the accent, right? It is fairly difficult for a lot of people globally to understand the Indian accent, right? And so one way of avoiding that is to talk slowly, wherever needed, pause, and when you are ending something, try and summarize. Yeah. So generally, people are told that, you know, Indians speak with varied accents. They speak extremely fast, right? And part of the reason as an excuse is our brains are moving so fast, and so we talk extremely fast, right? But remember this, once you are a professional, if you can, when you are speaking, talk slow, pause, don't be uncomfortable with a pause in a call. Yeah, it's okay if there are these silent moments on a call. You don't need to be uncomfortable, and wherever possible, summarize it, right? So these things are things. And then the other one, which I don't think is a negative, I think it's a pretty positive one, is, you know, we are fairly soft spoken. We don't generally open up a lot initially, and we take time to get comfortable with others. But once we are comfortable, we are fairly close. So I think we can ignore that one. But these are the aspects about Indians that non-Indians are told while, you know, in terms of preparing them to work with us. Okay. Now, I am going to go ahead and even talk about things which are not told or not taught in these trainings based on my experiences of what I have observed. Obviously, some of these are extremely uncomfortable, but I think it is important for us, right, to be aware of what others are saying and thinking about us, so that we can change for the better, and remove those impressions. Yeah. So before I go to that point, let me again pause and see if any of you have either a comment or a thought based on whatever I just mentioned. All good? Okay. So remember these things. Please take a pledge. Your generation will change it. Change the reputation and impression of Indians outside. Yeah. I hope you do. My generation screwed it up. And I apologize on behalf of that. So anyways, let's move on to some more uncomfortable facts about Indians, which I have noticed, given, how many times I have worked with people from other cultures, which are not said, right? So these are unsaid things, but fairly noticeable. Okay. So the first one, again, as I said, I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but I think it's good for us to discuss openly, right? Is the fact about hygiene, right? And this is especially true when you are young, right? Obviously, whatever hormones might be raging and so on, but numerous times I have seen people avoid getting into a lift when there are a few folks getting into the lift because you know I don't know, whatever it is, for whatever reason, whether they've not taken a bath or it's hot and sweaty and there's some kind of a stink coming. But please remember, as a professional, right, I mean, there are enough things like deodorants and perfumes and so on available. So try and use them, because you don't want to get into a situation or encounter where it's very visible that somebody is hesitating and not wanting to get into the lift with you or some of your friends. Yeah. So be observant about this thing, right? The second one is, for whatever reason, we take pride in jugaad and saying that, oh, what come what may, I'll get it done, right? Now unfortunately, there is also a negative connotation to that, which we need to be aware of, right? Which is, the impression it gives to people is that Indians just care about getting it done. They don't care about the quality, right? And hence there is an impression that our standard of quality is lower. We are willing to accept whatever is given to us as long as it gets done, right? And I do hope that that changes, and we don't necessarily always pride on saying that we did jugaad and got it done. Yeah. The third one is about keeping your word. Yeah. And I'll give you a couple of personal examples so that it makes sense. Okay. This is especially prevalent these days, right? Where, I mean, you see it very rampant in Bangalore, where people will accept offers, job offers that they have, and then even on the very last day will not show up for offers that they've accepted, signed the paperwork and so on. Yeah. Now, to give you a personal example, the first time that I realized, how professionals work was actually, when I was going for my master's, right, I actually had an interview. I got a call. The professor interviewed me, and then on the phone offered me, saying, if you come to our university, we'll give you whatever in-state tuition and an RA, a research assistantship of so and so dollars. Yeah. So I was obviously very thrilled. I said, sure, yeah, I would love to come, I'll come, and all of that. And I was like, in whatever, cloud nine for like 24 hours, right? And then I started thinking that, oh my God, I said yes, but I haven't received any, formal either letter or, I'm talking of literally days before email was here. And I called up my uncle who was living in the US to say, you know what, such and such has happened and I'm very worried. And my uncle, on the phone said, are you nuts? He told you on the phone, right, that he is going to give you this. And if he has given you his word, that means it will be done. There is no question of whether it will be fulfilled or not, right? And that's when I realized that having grown up, we often at times don't in our lives encounter necessarily people who treat their word as the final say, right? And I was starting to doubt him, and it was so different when this professor had apparently given his word that meant that it would get done, right? So that was my first exposure. And I do hope that we as a culture, right, it kind of relates to that first topic of our uncomfort levels of saying no. And so we'll just say yes and move on because we think that's an easy solution. But let's not get into that habit, right? And so if we give our word, let's make sure we stick with it. If we give a time, let's make sure we get there on time, right? The fourth and fifth point are kind of related, right? Some things are personal. I'm sure you guys have personal things that you keep to yourself. And once you become a professional, one thing to remember is that at least in most societies, right, compensation numbers, salary numbers, and those things are actually personal information which we should keep to ourselves, right? It's not something that we should be sharing around. I know as a young professional, you feel, oh, I'm only going to talk to my friend about it. But I will tell you this, that based on experience, nothing good ever comes out from sharing salary numbers. Yeah. So remember that. And then the next one, I think you can go research the Intel case, right? Where about 400, 500 people in Intel India were let go because of false claims of, getting tax benefits and so on. Those things are things that should be avoided as professionals, right? And then comes, we as a culture have, if we could work on our productivity, right? I mean, and I see this in our offices as well, right? People have a tendency of coming in very late in the mornings because obviously in most working places, there is nothing like a time, right? Like, oh, you have to show up at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. And so we tend to come in whenever we want to, which is fine. But we tend to take long breaks, and we need to spend whatever 10 hours or 11 hours to get our work done, because of our efficiencies being a little lower than many other places. Yeah. Now, why is all this important, right? All this, honestly, the reason I say is important because many a times you are going to be ambassadors for yourself, your team, your company, and sometimes even the country, right? So even though you don't have the title of an ambassador, people are making impressions about us as a society, about us as a culture, right? And ideally, if we can make good impressions of that, right, it will set the path for amazing things for us in the future, right? And what I mean by that is, for instance, right, I mean, it's very, very well known that anybody in the world, right, when they talk about Japanese people, right, there is a very certain set of characteristics that will come to your mind when you say, oh, I'm working with a Japanese person, right? And those are high quality, always on time, extremely hardworking and diligent, right? And so imagine the reputation of any Japanese going anywhere in the world, right? So we need to make sure that our positives always come forward. And unfortunately, most of the times, there are these certain other aspects that come to the fore when it regards to first impressions that people might have about us, right? So I'm just sharing this because, as I said, the generations before you guys have created certain things which need to be changed, and I do hope that each and every one of you will make the effort to change that. Yeah. So again, let me pause there and see if for any comments that you guys might have.
So as for the efficiency point, I think in India we have so many festivals, has we have so many breaks and holidays, and it kind of decreases our efficiency. It consumes a lot of time to do our work. So how can we avoid that situation?
Yeah, that's a I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I think, see, there are, certain cultural aspects which are fine. For instance, we have more holidays, we'll have more festivals than the others. I think those are accepted. The efficiency and productivity that I talk about is, when you go, I mean, having worked for such a long time in the US, the one thing that you observe is that, they are extreme sticklers for time. And when they are in the office, they are focused on work in the office, right? While over here, right, when we come to office, we have a tendency, and I'm not saying all of it is bad, some of it is good and some of it is needed, but I just feel sometimes we kind of overdo this, right? So people in our offices, for instance, will come in. As soon as they come in, they'll go for a coffee with a friend. Then, we'll have long lunch breaks. Then we'll play table tennis. Then in the afternoon, we'll again go for a 30-minute, coffee break with a walk and so on. So some of these things which are more even during the day, if we can be a little more particular, again, and I understand the demographic difference, right? So obviously when you are, whatever, I don't know, 21 to 25, 26, right? You don't have anything else to do. So you tend to spend more time in the office, uh, right? And do these kind of things. But I think generally speaking, if we can be as productive as possible in the hours that we are in the office, I think it will go a long way in changing that impression. Versus, let's not worry about, culturally we have more festivals. Hey, that's a good sign. I mean, I think that's a good thing that we have, which we should cherish as well. Okay, so I have talked about a lot of things that, we need to work on and improve. And I don't want you guys to go away thinking that I am being overly negative, right? Obviously, there is a reason why the whole world wants to come and work over here, right? There is a reason why most multinationals have their offices over here, right? So while we work on these aspects of becoming better professionals, let's not forget, right, of why we are valued. Because under no circumstances, trying to become, on time, we lose out on things that the world thinks very highly about Indians, right? When you talk about Indians, the other thing very similar to the Japanese that comes out is that Indians are extremely hardworking and extremely dedicated, right? We are also fairly ambitious and are always looking for upward mobility, right? Which is we want to rise in our careers wherever we get the opportunity. Yeah, there is a fairly common belief that Indians are willing to do whatever it takes to succeed, right? And we will go above and beyond in order to make sure that we can get things done, right? So remember these three aspects, right? One of the other things that I want to leave for us, because we as a culture have this, and some of us, right, just because of language differences, feel that, you know, we equate good English to intelligence. And honestly, having worked for so many years across globally, that is something that we have to get out of our head, right? Which is English is just a first language for them. It is a second language for us. And just because we do not speak their language as well does not mean that, you know, we lack in any way, form or shape with regards to intelligence. So let's always remember that we can be uncomfortable sometimes because we have to, you know, given the demographic and given the type of company, we may have to speak in English, but never think of yourself as lacking on concepts, intelligence, real hardcore technical skills just because you don't speak English. Yeah. The other thing which is also very well known is we are extremely good technically, but we are poor communicators, right? And so what we need to work on is, you know, figuring out how we can overcome the things that we aren't good at. Yeah. The other thing that you do hear people say about us is, you know, we are extremely respectful of, you know, visitors. When they visit, we take exceptionally good care. We are extremely hospitable, right? And there is obviously a reason why every single company wants to have an India center, why multinationals want to come to India. You see it globally, right? Indian raised CEOs. And remember, I'm making a very distinction over here. I personally believe that Indian raised, which is born and brought up in India, will always have a lot more success than even second generation Indians, right? And there is something about the fact of being raised in India that, you know, some of these things that are listed above help us be prepared to literally succeed anywhere we go in our lives. Yeah. And obviously, Indian services companies have made a good name for us. And now we are seeing product companies also, which is our ability to build products globally is coming to the fore. So I'm going to leave you with this, which is, you know, there are obviously a lot of things for us to work on, a lot of things for us to improve. The good news is that where we lack are things we can get better at easily, right? Just if we know we are not going to be able to get something done, just say no, right? Have a good hygiene, be on time, respond to email invites. When we are on a video call, turn your videos on. Those are much easier for us to get done than imagine if we were not hardworking, or we were not dedicated, or we did not have the willingness or ability to go above and beyond, or we were not good technically. If these were our faults, we would have a much bigger and a much more difficult hill to climb. But the good news is that the areas that we need to improve are actually very easy ones. And just imagine if we are able to keep our strengths and improve some of the things that we are not good at, there is nothing literally that can stop us. Yeah. So that's all that I had really. And I'm going to pause again and see what you guys think and anything that you would like to bring up. Come on, all you guys know me. We've been face to face. There shouldn't be any reason to hesitate. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree? Not agree?
Yes, sir, we very much agree.
And so am I getting a commitment from this group of 30 odd people that you guys will rectify the mistakes that my generation made and fix it for us for the future?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we will. And it's not
sir.
a yes, that typical Indian yes, it's a commitment yes.
Awesome. Cool. All right. What else, guys? You guys are awfully quiet, man. I thought like when we were in Kota, you guys were like really fairly active. Why are you guys so quiet today? Exams hai kya?
No, sir, already as the summer is happening.
Oh, too hot is what Shivansh is saying. All right, guys. I didn't have anything else. I mean, I can stay for 5 more minutes, or it's up to you. If you guys want to end it early, we can end it early. I'm willing to hang on. If you guys want to discuss something else, it doesn't have to be even about this particular topic. If you want to talk something else, we can talk something else. Or we can just say, let's go get some chai. Nothing? Oh, sorry. I do see something from Rohit. Oh, you're welcome, Rohit. Anytime. Thanks for the comment, Rohit. Is that it, guys?
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
You are very welcome.
Thank
I
you.
hope you guys have a good rest of Saturday and a great Sunday. Try and stay cool. And until we meet again. Okay,
Yes,
take
sir.
care. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.